The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. This is UCY.tv. I'm your host, Walter, coming to you from the Netherlands. It's the 30th of April, 2016. 4 p.m. in the Netherlands, and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. How you doing, everybody? There's a couple of people in the UCY chat already. You can get there if you go to ucy.tv. Welcome, Captain, Cracker, Grump, and Juano, Matty Clues, Possible Suspect, Shirley, and Vince, and Tuanons. Good morning, good morning. I don't know how good morning it is for some. 10 a.m. Eastern means like way too early, of course, on the other side. So today we should be continuing with Tragedy and Hope 101 by Joe Plummer. And so that's what we're gonna do. If you want to comment or have questions, maybe you want to dig out something deeper, and we may do that while we read it. We use a special tool for that, and I'll put it in the chat room. Let's see where I left off last time. Or actually, we left off here last time. Here we go. Webbrain.com. This is the the brain from. It's like picking someone's brain, right? This is the brain from Richard Grove, tragedyandhope.com. And it's apparently people can use this. And the last time we used that, we were digging into Cecil Rhodes and all his connections, and maybe we should do that some more. See, that's the Cecil Rhodes Milner Roundtable Group, and apparently there were more of those roundtable groups, which were called all of them were called roundtable groups. But there's really too much to go into on this brain page. Who Are the Windsors by Webster Tarpley. Yeah, that's a video I saw also. I'm not quite sure. I think it was at a presentation from a well-known organization, which in some circles has like a bad name. don't remember the name, unfortunately. So yeah, who was he? Webster Tarpley. I've listened to some of his stuff, and I think it's all about geopolitics. At least what I heard, it was a lot about geopolitics. But the tone that he says, the tone at which he speaks, that is like he really believes it, right? So as if geopolitics is real and not more of a let's say upper puppet show. It has to be. There's a history since 1917 about companies and institutions, foundations, helping up the Soviet Union, and it's all planned. So I don't think these geopolitics are anything real. I think they are just as fake as national politics. Oh. All right. Let's see where we're here. Somewhere about 2/3 down chapter 3. In the case of elections, the public trusts... Oh, no, before we continue, I remember now something. All Souls, and we should check if we can find something like that in the brain, because last time we discussed this book, we came across the term All Souls, remember? And we didn't even research that. I don't know exactly what it means. So where does the brain, let's see if we can, in the search bar, if you type in All Souls, if we get a search, yeah. It's the All Souls College in Oxford. And this probably ties to the Cecil Rhodes Scholars Funds, right? Yeah, see, before him was John Cecil Rhodes, and also a link between 1862, Rome and Jerusalem, a study in Jewish nationalism, Zionism, in brackets, by Moses Hess. I never heard of that. So, Oxford, All Souls College in Oxford, official name the Warden and the College of the Souls of all faithful people deceased in the University of Oxford. Wow. Is a constituent college of the University of Oxford in England. Hold on, guys. Unique to All Souls, all of its members automatically become fellows. Right? And that's clickable, but I don't know what Wiki has to say about fellow. I.e., the fellows, brackets open, i.e. full members of the college governing body. It has no undergraduate members, but each year recent graduates of the university and graduates of other university now registered as postgraduate student at Oxford are eligible to apply for examination fellowship through a competitive examination, once described as the hardest exam in the world, and for several shortlisted after the examination and interview. Alright, so what I was told, I'm not quite sure, I think it was Kevin Cole, but don't quote me on this, could have been somebody else, that in order to get into this All Souls College department, so to speak, you not only had to have had completed the whole Oxford graduation thing, whatever that is, I have no clue. But also, you couldn't ask to get in there. You were invited in there. There was no such thing as an application. All Souls is one of the wealthiest colleges in Oxford, with a financial endowment of 286 somewhat pounds. That's in 2014. However, since the college's principal source of revenue is its endowment, it only ranks 19th among Oxford colleges with respect to total income. History. The college was founded by Henry VI of England and Henry Chisel, Fellow of New College and Archbishop of Canterbury in 1438. The statutes provided for by the warden and 40 fellows, all to take the holy orders, 24 to study arts, philosophy and theology, and 16 to study civil or canon law. Alright, that's about enough. Let's see, back this up, there we go. That over there. So, in the case of elections, the public trusts the so-called credible media to narrow the field down to the top-tier candidates. A political sideshow ensues. At the end, voters choose who they prefer to have in office, but their choice isn't what they perceive it to be. Sure, they are technically choosing who they prefer, but they are choosing from a list of candidates that was chosen for them. Sadly, this sleight of hand works just as well today as it did 100 years ago. And unless this concept becomes widely understood, it will work 100 years from now as well. Returning to Bernays from his book Propaganda, political campaigns today are all sideshows, all honors, all bombast, glitter and speeches. These are for the most part unrelated to the main business of studying the public scientifically, of supplying the public with party, candidate, platform, and selling the public these ideas and products. In short, without the network's backing, a candidate will remain a relative nobody in the election. They will be relegated to begging door to door for enough money to run an almost meaningless advertising campaign. However, with network backing, the candidate can count on millions of dollars in campaign donations, a long list of credible endorsements, and a nearly priceless amount of exposure through the network's propaganda instruments. In the unlikely event that a truly independent candidate emerges, With enough money or a large enough following to gain some ground, the network will simply use its instruments to smear and ostracize the candidate and the candidate's supporters. To be clear, this isn't to suggest that the network-backed candidates are necessarily involved in the election deception. President of the United States is a job title that fewer than 45 men have held. The desire to join the ranks of such an exclusive club, with all of its attendant perks, is undoubtedly very real. The candidates might even genuinely disagree with a few positions held by their opponents. In fact, it's even better if they do. The meaningless bickering between them and the partisan hysteria it incites among the public only adds to the overall illusion of voter choice. But on the issues that matter most to the network, each sponsored candidate is virtually identical in value. The beauty of this system is its simplicity. The network scouts potential talent, performs the necessary background checks, and, after conveying its expectations, offers its vital assistance to a handful of candidates. After some bombast, glitter and speeches, the public chooses from the products, party, candidate and platform, that were put before them. Now let's quickly expand a little on how and why the network ousted incumbent President William Howard Taft and installed Woodrow Wilson. Yeah. Summary of the 1912 coup. The 1912 election presented an incredible opportunity for the network. Although William Howard Taft had served the conspirators well by openly entertaining the idea of relinquishing U.S. sovereignty and supporting the network's long-sought funding mechanism, the income tax, and that's at 30. That should be at Wikipedia under William Howard Taft. He'd failed to support the one measure that was more important than all others. He refused to support Nelson Aldrich's plan to hand the nation's money supply over to the network through the creation of a central bank. Since the central bank was necessary to truly dominate the United States, Taft's rejection of the Aldrich plan constituted a major transgression. But there was a remedy, and that remedy's name was Woodrow Wilson. Wilson had done more than openly entertain the idea of relinquishing national sovereignty. He'd developed a near fanatical obsession with the idea. Yeah, this Woodrow seems to have had a grandiose idea about world order. So, yeah, the consequence of that is no national sovereignty. There would be no problem getting him to passionately evangelize the New World Order on behalf of the network. It will also be no problem getting Wilson to sign the network's income tax scam into law. Oh, really? What law? What is that? The income tax was sold as a way to punish the rich and enrich the poor. In reality, the tax simply extracts money from US citizens and dumps it directly into the network's projects and pockets. It's unfortunate, right, that there's no link available in this document about the law that they're talking about here, right? It says it would also be no problem getting Wilson to sign the network's income tax scam into law. And, here in the Netherlands, it's not a topic at all. But I understand that in the United States, this is a topic, and lots of people say, "Well, what law? What law are you talking about? Show me the law!" Right? That was the slogan, right? Last, but certainly not least, control of the nation's money supply would be far easier to secure with Wilson in the White House, for one reason. Wilson admitted that he really didn't understand central banking, and this was very convenient. The creature from Jekyll Island is the source for that he had no idea about banking. The network could provide all the right advisors, steering the creation of the so-called Federal Reserve System from start to finish. Another reason the central bank would be easier to secure under Wilson is because the entire issue had been successfully framed in partisan terms. That is, a previous central bank plan had been put forward by a Republican senator named Nelson Aldrich. Since everyone knew that Aldrich was a network-connected insider, the legislation was shut down by Democrats when it bore his name. For this, the Democrats were largely seen as having protected the little guy from another big business Republican scheme. With the people convinced that the Democrats had protected them, any alternative central bank plan put forward under a Democratic administration would rouse far less suspicion. The network could simply drop the name Aldrich, wrap the legislation in some progressive rhetoric, and sell the exact same thing with Wilson and his Democrats and his Democratic administration acting as trusted pitchman. Like the income tax, the central bank would be represented as a way to protect the people from the rich and powerful. In truth, it accomplished the exact opposite. Next is a side note. The central bank issue is so critical to the network's plan for dominating the world that I've written an entire book on the subject. A sizable amount of the next chapter will be devoted to this topic, but for now, here is what Quigley said the network intended to create with its central banking power. Alright, so Joe Plummer has apparently written another book, and the title is Dishonest Money, Financing the Road to Ruin. Okay. And this is what Quigley says, ... A world system of financial control in private hands able to dominate the political system of each country. The apex of the system was to be a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. Each central bank sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, to influence the level of economic activity in the country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. As a quick reminder, this isn't a case of quickly guessing at the network's intentions. He speaks with the authority of a man who, in his own words, knows of the operations of this network, because he studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 60s to examine its papers and secret records. That's in Tragedy and Hope, page 950. So, when comparing the Republican candidate, Taft, to the Democratic candidate, Wilson, there was no question who the network wanted more. The decision was made. Mandel House paid Wilson a visit, and the process of grooming Wilson for the presidency began. In November 1911, Wilson met Edward Mandel House, one of the first kingmakers in modern American politics, almost from the first. The colonel, which he liked to call himself, but which he actually wasn't, later recalled, "Our minds vibrated in unison. Wilson concurred. Mr. House is my second personality. His thoughts and mine are one." James Perloff describes a follow-up meeting at the Democratic Party headquarters in New York. Wilson received an indoctrination course from the leaders convened there, during which he agreed in principle to do the following if elected: support the projected Federal Reserve, support the income tax, lend an ear to advice should war break out in Europe, lend an ear to advice on who should occupy his cabinet. And that's in The Shadows of Power, the Council on Foreign Relations and the American Decline, page 27. As mentioned in footnote 16, House pulled all of his necessary strings to ensure the Democratic nomination for president went to Wilson. But as impressive as that level of influence might be, it's still a long way from actually putting a man in the White House. And, unfortunately for the network, Taft was heavily favored to win against its preferred candidate. Not a problem. As luck would have it, that's quote-unquote luck, as luck would have it, the network found another potential candidate that it could run against Taft. Not just any candidate, mind you, but a former two-term Republican president. And not just any two-term Republican president, but the same one that Republican President Taft had just replaced in 1909, Teddy Roosevelt. This was a brilliant strategic move, the most obvious reason being, 10 months prior to the 1912 election, Roosevelt had expressed a willingness to support the Eldridge Plan. Therefore, whether Wilson or Roosevelt won, the network could get its central bank, but most obvious reason isn't the only or best reason for why the network poured more than $10 million, inflation adjusted, into Roosevelt's campaign. Sure, Roosevelt was acceptable, but the network still preferred Wilson. and by splitting the vote they could have him, Perloff explains. Polls showed incumbent President Taft as a clear favorite over the stiff-looking professor from Princeton. So, to divide the Republican vote, the network put money behind Teddy Roosevelt on the Progressive Party ticket J.P. Morgan and Co. J.P. Morgan and Co. was the financial backbone of the Roosevelt campaign. The strategy succeeded. Republican ballots were split between Taft and Roosevelt, and Woodrow Wilson became president with only 42% of the popular vote. And that's also in the Shadows of Power, the Council on Foreign Relations and the American Decline, page 27. The full result of the 1912 elections were as follows. Wilson received 41.8% of the vote. Roosevelt received 27.4%, and Taft received only 23.2%. How is that for impressive? William Howard Taft, a man who would have handily won the election with a strong majority, wound up dead last in a three-way race against two network-manufactured candidates. House summed it up this way. Wilson was elected by Teddy Roosevelt. The rest, as they say, is history. Hey there, Hopper, how you doing? After the election, House proceeded to fill the president's important cabinet positions with the best advisors the network had to offer. He guided Wilson's policy decisions like a disembodied spirit that had found its opportunity to shape the world with Wilson's hands. Before the end of 1913, the income tax would be law. Again, no link. Before the end of 1913, the central bank would be a reality. These new instruments provided the funding and leverage that the network needed to greatly accelerate its sovereignty destruction project. But they, alone, would not provide the greatest opportunity to capitalize on Wilson's evangelical crusade to make the world safe for democracy. Yeah. That's one of the stupid slogans. You hear that more often, right? Make the world safe for democracy. It's so out of reality that it's even hard to comment on it. Now, first of all, the word democracy, that's like secret speak for socialism. Or any, doesn't matter what kind of form of government you're talking about here. That's what I mean with it being so far out of reality that it's hard to comment on. And then to make the world safe, right? The word safe here is, of course, the important one. And how do you do that? Well, by bombing countries, of course, right? That's how you make places safe. It's just absolute insanity. Only a long and protracted world war with funding guaranteed by the new instruments could achieve that, right? It's like war is peace, right? Make the world safe for democracy. You might as well say war is peace. Once again, as luck would have it, just such an opportunity presented itself shortly after Wilson took office. World War I provided the political impetus for the network's first major attempt at establishing a global government. It's the League of Nations. And although it wasn't as successful as they might have hoped, the League of Nations, along with all the other instruments that came into existence under Wilson, laid the foundation for all of the network's progress over the past 100 years. And that's the end of chapter 3, which brings us to chapter 4. Juana says, make the world safe for democracy was Bernays' origin at World War I Paris Peace Accord, if she remembers correct. Yeah, that's quite possible. Chapter 4, guys. Money, the ultimate instrument. Chupa, chupa, chupa. Antiquity presents everywhere the spectacle of a few men molding mankind according to their whims, thanks to the prestige of force and fraud. This is Frederick Bastiat. I'm gonna have to change the page here so I can actually see the links. Scroll all the way down. Blah. 1. That's from The Law, page 50, whatever that is. Frederick Bastiat. The Law, page 50. Hopefully by now we've established the fact that a small, powerful and secretive group can alter the course of world history. Yeah, that's another thing that strikes me. Maybe it's the English language, right? But isn't it like the future you want to, try to shape? You can't change what happened in history, right? So there's no such thing as altering the course or what happened in history. Maybe it's a saying, I don't know, whatever. Additionally, we've established that this form of coercive power, hidden, dishonest, and dangerous, is nothing new. It existed thousands of years ago. It existed hundreds of years ago, and it exists today. Only the names, sophistication, and reach of the instruments have changed. Since this form of power is inherently illegitimate, we need no further justification to free ourselves from it. Alright, so it says here, it existed thousands of years ago. Yeah, that's correct. It existed in India at that time, for instance, where they had, like we have here now, we just call it different names. They had a caste system, which still is used today. And the Brahmanas, who were at the top of this system, they taught the class beneath them, the Kshatriyas as they were called, who were in charge of all things army, among other things. And they would teach them what they needed to know to be a good Kshatriya. They would not teach them the secrets that these Brahmanas kept for themselves. Right? They knew all about, for instance, human nature and how to influence people, how to control masses of people. mentally, right? Not physically, mentally. Mind control. That's what the Vedas are about, mind control. It's like Plato. It's about mind control. And how to rule masses of people. And so it's probably pretty hard for people to snap out of it, so to speak. And this is also due to the fact of, well, of course, schooling. But even before that, not that they didn't have schools thousands of years ago, they did. But also, if your parents think that what is going on is normal, they will raise you with that idea, and you will, if you don't ask questions, accept everything that's going on around you as normal. And so that's a problem, right? It's the I would say, quote unquote trauma, right? It's so deep that it's impossible to escape, so to speak. Blah, blah. As noted, a handful of individuals have played such an important role in the creation of our current system that their names must be mentioned. However, targeting individuals within the system isn't going to solve our problems. No. You know, these people, I don't care how many they are, if they are 3 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, it doesn't matter. They can only rule us by our quote-unquote consent. Whether this consent is by ignorance or not, that doesn't matter, right? If you can keep people away from the information that they need, then it's very easy to influence the choices that they make, right? And so they live because we do as they say, right? So the power really lies with us, with the billions of us, as opposed to the tiny percentage of world's population that they represent. This reminds me of a video by Larkin Rose called The Dot. I think it's called The Dot, or The Little Dot, something like that. Very impressive. All right. I heard that he was even attacked for bringing up this idea, right? That we have the power, they don't. I find that kind of strange because I've been saying that on Orion, no, not Orion, on Oracle for a while, very short while. But our slogan was, they need us, we don't need them, right? And that's true. We don't need them. They need us. That's why there's so much energy and money and effort put into controlling us from birth to death. Via schools, via information giving outlets like the mainstream media and other things. Newspapers, movies. Most people are being played like a fiddle and they have no clue. And that's what empowers them. not the amounts of money that they have. It's the belief, the hallucination that people are under, which empowers them. All right, let's see. My checkie is klaar. Even if only 1 out of 1,000 people are genius-level sociopaths, the percentage is probably higher. Excuse me. Yeah. Much higher, he says. That equals 7 million potential recruits for the network to draw from. In other words, there will always be an inexhaustible pool of replacements available to fill the tiny number of key policy-making posts within the system. For this reason, the predatory system itself must be destroyed. Fortunately for us, there is a vital target for us to strike. One foundational element that the entire system is built on and cannot stand without: the network's control of money. This is their primary weapon, and it is well within our power to take it from them. The vast majority of people like you and me, don't think of money as a weapon. For us, it's simply something that we earn and then use to purchase products and services. The network, on the other hand, has a much deeper understanding of what money is and how to wield its power. For them, money isn't about acquiring more material goods or services. It's about acquiring more control over the resources and instruments that govern human behavior. When viewed in this light, their seemingly insatiable desire to accumulate and control money makes more sense. Keep in mind, this doesn't mean that personal ownership of money is the network's most effective monetary weapon. In fact, we could take away the personal fortunes of all of its members, and if that's all we did, their power would remain undisturbed, and they would rebuild their fortunes in no time. This is because the network knows something that most of us do not. Control of money, not actual ownership, is what truly matters. Where you and I cannot imagine having the ability to control money that doesn't belong to us, the network cannot imagine having it any other way. In this chapter, we'll cover the 3 primary mechanics that the network uses to perpetuate its monetary power. These mechanisms are: 1. The ability to combine and control the earnings of others. 2. The ability to directly confiscate the earnings of others. And 3. The ability to create money out of thin air. 1. Combine and control money. Beginning in the pages 50 to 51 of Tragedy and Hope, Quigley speaks of a group that employs financial capitalism to monopolize business and control government. As expert in financial manipulation, these men aspire to establish dynasties of international bankers, and according to Quigley, they succeeded at a level that rivaled the political dynasties of past centuries. Centered in London, with offshoots in New York and Paris, the power of this group is described as overwhelming, in significance and occult in nature. By 1850, they could access the immense monetary power of the stock exchange, the Bank of England, and the London money market. But this was just the beginning. Alright, that's by 1850, and that's 2. And 2 says, it's worth noting that this period of financial capitalism clearly predates the Rhodes-created network that quickly describes in both the Anglo-American establishment and Tragedy and Hope. As such, it's reasonable to suggest that the real roots of the Rhodes network and the real power existed long before Cecil Rhodes entered the picture. However, since this book is focused on the proven conspiracy, identified and exposed by Quigley, a detailed account of what existed before Rhodes will have to be told elsewhere. No. In time, they brought into their financial network commercial banks and savings banks, as well as insurance companies. To form all of these into a single financial system on an international scale, which manipulated the quantity and flow of money. Just to clarify, these men did not own the money that citizens placed in commercial and savings banks. They did not own the money that citizens paid into retirement funds, insurance funds, or trust funds. However, as already mentioned, they didn't need to own the money. All they needed was the power to control it, and that they had. As long as an institution within their financial network held the funds, they could direct those funds towards increasing their power. They alone determined how and where that enormous international pool of money would be invested. Bankers, especially international investment bankers, were able to dominate both business and government. They could dominate business because investment bankers had the ability to supply or refuse to supply capital. They took seats on the boards of directors of industrial firms, as they had already done on commercial banks, saving banks, insurance firms, and finance companies. They funneled capital to enterprises which yielded control and away from those who resisted. Another side note. Excuse me, guys. Quigley points out that bankers have far less power over those who can finance their own operations. As such, any group seeking to create a ruling dynasty of international bankers would be wise to create a system that is built on debt and undermines independent financing. Anything that devours or wipes out the wealth of outsiders will create endless opportunities for members of the dynasty who have an inexhaustible supply of money to loan, always with strings attached. And that's 5. And at 5 it says, these international bankers eventually gave themselves the power to simply create money out of thin air so they could loan it to others. The power of investment bankers over governments rests on a number of factors, of which the most significant perhaps is the need of governments to borrow money. Just as businessmen go to commercial banks for current capital advances, So a government has to go to merchant bankers or institutions controlled by them to tide over the shallow places caused by irregular tax receipts. As experts in government bonds, the international bankers not only handled the necessary advances but provided advice to government officials and, on many occasions, placed their own members in official posts. In addition to their power over government based on government financing and personal influence, bankers could steer governments in ways they wished them to go by other pressures. Since most government officials felt ignorant of finance, they sought advice from bankers who they considered to be experts in the field. The history of the last century shows that the advice given to governments by bankers, like the advice they gave to industrialists, was consistently good for bankers, but was often disastrous for governments, businessmen, and the people generally. Such advice could be enforced if necessary by manipulation of exchanges, gold flows, discount rates, and even levels of business activity. To summarize, using enormous amounts of other people's money, international bankers essentially purchased their way into powerful business and government positions. With each new position, they gained control of more money. With control of more money, they gained access to more positions, so on and so forth. Through this process, they secured enough monetary power to enforce their advice on both business and governments alike, expanding the reach of their hidden dynasties each step of the way. This now brings us to the network's two crowning achievements of 1913, the federal income tax and the Federal Reserve System. Using government as its instrument, the network granted itself the legal authority to both create and directly confiscate the money it needs to finance its global objectives. The enormity of this topic, especially regarding the legal right to create money, requires hundreds of pages to cover properly. This chapter will provide only a short introduction. To fully understand the power derived from creating money, I highly recommend further research into the Federal Reserve System. 7. And at 7 it says, for a good beginner's guide, under 200 pages, read Dishonest Money, Finance the Road to Ruin. For a much more thorough account, 600 pages, I highly recommend The Creature from Jekyll Island. For now, let's start with the easier of the two funding mechanisms, not money creation, but money confiscation. Confiscate money. On page 938 of Tragedy and Hope, quickly draws a flawed conclusion. He assumes that J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Carnegie, etc. must have lacked control over the government in 1913. If they had more power, he suggests, they would have stopped the federal income tax from becoming law. Like so many others who've accepted the alleged purpose of the income tax, Quigley fails to put two and two together. An income tax that is paid into a system that the network controls only serves to strengthen the network's position. It creates another massive flow of people's money to tap into. Yeah. All right. It's the top of the hour, guys. What's up, everybody? In the chat room of Real Liberty Media, if you were there, you can get the link from Vince. Stop the Lie starts at chapter 1. We are now a bit further. And you can read the whole thing on there, online there, and you can buy it also if you like. Check it out, reallibertymedia.com. They have a whole list of links that you can click at the top of the page. And in the UCY channel, there's also still people there. How you doing, everybody? We're gonna take a small break. And this is from Poker Face. At pokerface.com you can find more videos that they have on YouTube. I don't know exactly how long this will last, but we will see, right? It's not gonna be a problem of any sort. He's gonna talk a little first. Check it out at pokerface.com. Hoppla.
It's been awesome. Folks, we threw a kick-ass party, man. We had great bands, we had great speakers, we had great people here. Cool campers, freedom lovers, family lovers, God lovers, country lovers. It's all good, man. Spread the word.
Why did you do this?
Why did I do this?
Why did you do this?
Because I want to live in a free world, not a tyrannical Bolshevik slave state, man. You know, all the wrong Bolsheviks are in the right police state positions to do to America what happened to Russia. And I'm trying everything in my power, in our band's power, to make sure that doesn't happen. So, that was me? Nice. We are Poker Face. We thank you for being participants of Freedom Palooza 2012. We're gonna kick you off with a little warm-up song called Illuminati.
Why?
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Horses. Give me a 3-4.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur Event. Check them out at UCY.tv. Also, if you want, go check out Freedom's Network. And that's freedomsnetwork.com. It's like a Facebooky kind of things, but without the nasty things you get from Facebook. There's one here, I have it open here at one. It's about, let's see if I can actually open that in the new. It's a picture of a natural law and man's law. Natural law, it says here, based upon principles and truth, inherent to creation, harmonized with, due to knowledge and understanding, and then universal, exists and applies anywhere in the universe, regardless of location. Eternal and immutable, exists and applies for as long as the universe exists and cannot be changed. Well, that's not what I understood about this natural law thing. I'd like to discuss that if somebody wants to, you know. It's a difficult topic, I think. There's people, for instance, that say natural law, yeah, well, that's all good and fine, and they have all kinds of explanations of what this natural law is supposed to be. But if you then understand that, then the question comes, well, this is applicable to humans, right? You can't. This is not applicable to animals, since animals don't have free choice, for instance. And so it's only usable on humans. And if it's eternal, you know, that doesn't make sense, because that would make the claim that humans have also been here eternally. And the whole idea about these laws, you know, somehow coming into existence, they claim that with the Big Bang explosion also. They say, well, time came into existence at that point. And this is used by this creature in a wheelchair. He uses this bit of knowledge to lead somebody off. And with the question, when he damn well knows exactly what is meant by the question, he pisses it off right? By arguing against this question and saying that the question is invalid, when in fact, the intention of the question is clear. There's no question about it. And the question is, what happened before the Big Bang? Right? And then the answer from this creature in this wheelchair is, well, there was no before. Time didn't exist. So there was no before. So the question, it's irrelevant. Right? That's how he tries to get away with the idea that you can create something from nothing. Right? Don't go, before the Big Bang, because that's not allowed. And besides the fact that it's exactly what the Bible says, also. It also talks about the void and things coming into existence one by one. And so the question is, it is with these laws, right? If they are eternal, well, then the universe must be eternal. All these consequences that this has, right? If natural law is eternal, then the universe must be eternal. Yeah, difficult topic. Let's see. Anybody in the chat, anything to say about natural law? Yes, I do, Iota. I live in the Netherlands. And so the other thing, man's law, based upon dogmatic beliefs, constructs of mind, complied with due to fear of punishment, differs with location based upon the whim of the legislator, and that's brackets open moral relativism, and another one, changes with time based upon the whim of the legislator. Yeah. Alright, so what you can say about natural law, as it has been presented to me at least, is that at least they don't break the ASA. They don't break the law of identity. Right? And with man's law, that law is constantly broken. Alright. So that's at freedomsnetwork.com. Check it out. I'm there also with my usual name. It's Solvinur. And at UCY you can see, if you mouse over shows, you can see a whole lot of lists, a lot of people making radio. And there's archives for the most of them. And if there's no archives there, there's a link probably, like with Alan Watt. There's a link to his podcasts. I hear he's still alive. Somebody pasted a link in Tragedy and Hope, where Alan comes back after being away for a while. Apparently he had been in the hospital. And so now he's back, getting his strength back, I think. That's what it sounded like anyway. So, let's see. This is where we were. Even if high-ranking members like J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Carnegie, etc. had paid the income tax like everyone else, they'd still gain control over far more money than they'd paid in. The amount of money collected from the rest of the population each year ran into the billions by 1917, then tens of billions by the 1940s, then hundreds of billions by the 70s, and it runs into the trillions today. And that's usgovernmentrevenue.com where you can find that. Remember, they don't have to own the money to determine how it's spent. Of course, these men did not pay income taxes like everyone else. Instead, they used the government to establish tax-exempt foundations before the income tax became law. This not only enabled them to shield their own fortunes, but it also enabled them to gain further control over Ivy League education and the federal government itself. Remarkably, Quigley acknowledges the ultimate effect of the income tax and the tax-exempt foundations. And when you hear like tax-exempt foundations, immediately there should be like a bell going off in your head, or Reese, and a church committee, you know. If it doesn't, you should probably check it out, Reese committee. And what's that man's name again? It's on the tip of my tongue. I don't remember his name at the moment. G. Edward Griffin interviewed him. And this looks like an old video, maybe from the 50s or 60s or somewhere. And he's talking there about... this is one of the things that I remember from it. He talks about his secretary, Catherine, and she was sent on a mission to investigate the minutes of these tax-exempt foundations in New York. And that was from a very long period, and it was like too much to do in such a short time. And so he instructed her to leave certain periods of time she could skip and focus on a couple of other things. And 2 weeks later she came back with the results. And then he says he never really had contact with her again. And that she somehow got a job somewhere, but that ultimately she committed suicide. And this was probably due to what she found out. Right? And I imagine that in those days, this is also confirmed by others, by the way, but that in those days, people actually had more trust in government. And that, you know, what she found out was so totally inconceivable, right, that she committed suicide over it. That's how it came across to me as he tells the story, by the way. So, and this, of course, had all to do with the presidential directive. I don't know if you call it that, but it came from the White House. This policy given to these foundations, like the Ford foundations, was to make the United States in such a way that it could merge with communist Russia. That was the whole goal of these tax-exempt foundations. Alright, where were we, guys? This not only enabled them to shield their own fortunes, but it also enabled them to gain further control over Ivy League education and the federal government itself. Remarkably, quickly acknowledges the ultimate effect of the income tax and tax-exempt foundations, but he doesn't seem to think about it much further. These tax laws drove the great private fortunes into tax-exempt foundations, which became a major link in the establishment network between Wall Street, the Ivy League, and the federal government. Alright, so what's Ivy League? Let's see if we can get to know a little bit more about that. Where's my brain page? Here it is. Put it in the search bar. There we go. Ivy League. Ivy League prep schools. Ivy League presidents. Ivy League schools. Seven sister schools. Women's Ivy League. Okay, Ivy League prep schools. What's that? The league comprises the following schools: Collegiate School in Manhattan, Dalton School in Manhattan, Fieldston School in Riverdale, Bronx, Hackley School in Tarrytown, Westchester County, Horace Mann School, who the heck is that, Horace Mann, in Riverdale, Bronx, Poly Prep, in Brooklyn, New York, Riverdale County School in Riverdale, and Trinity School in Manhattan. Former members are Delphi School. Sports offered? What the heck is that? Notably Ivy Prep League athlete alumni. Is this the right page? Yeah, it is the right page. That's all, guys. We're not getting anything here. Let's see what else we can find. What else can we find? Prep schools. Ivy League prep schools is preceded by Americans, Eastern Establishment Families and Power Structure schools. And Ivy League schools. Let's see. Ivy League. Now this is getting better. Ivy League. This article is about the group of colleges and the athletic conference that gave their group its name. For other uses, see disambiguation. Is an athletic conference. What the heck is that, guys? Ivy League. EVS Ancient 8. Ancient 8? The Ivy League is a collegiate athletic conference comprising sports teams from 8 private institutions of higher education in the northeastern United States. Alright, that's not interesting enough. Let's see, members. No. Origin of the name? Nah. Pre-Ivy League? 7 out of the 8 Ivy League schools were founded before the American Revolution. Cornell was founded just after the American Civil War. History of the Athletic League. This is to do with sports, guys. I'm not really interested in all of that. Alright, so back to where we were. For insight into how the network really felt about the income, it's probably not, just about sports, this Ivy League thing. It's probably something, which doesn't appear to the surface with a quick search. For insight into how the network really felt about the income tax, we can simply turn our attention back to Edward Mandell House. In his book Philip Drew Administrator, written anonymously before the income tax amendment was passed, House openly attacked the grotesque American Constitution, he did, because it prevented the government from collecting an income tax from its citizens. Wow. Not that I'm quite sure if this American Constitution is a good idea. You know, if you check, you go ahead, check it out. Go find the China Constitution. Go find the Russia Constitution. And look how much difference there is really between them. There isn't much. You know, it doesn't mean a thing, to be honest with you. It doesn't mean a thing for the people. And if this American Constitution somehow magically creates a thing called government, then it's even worse. Continuing, short after House's choice for president, Woodrow Wilson, was placed in office, the grotesque constitutional barrier was removed and the money began to flow. Sadly, few Americans realized that the United States did not have a permanent personal income tax prior to 1913. That's 1111. A temporary income tax was imposed by Lincoln to fund the Civil War in 1861. Though the tax outlived the war, it ended circa... I should smoke some more, I think. Ended circa 1873. An attempt in 1894 to create a permanent income tax was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court a year later. It wasn't until 1913, with the passage of the 16th Amendment, that our current federal income tax came to be. Alright, that was 11. Think about that for a minute. America went from being a sparsely settled nation of wilderness in 1776 to the most prosperous and arguably most powerful nation on the planet without an income tax. Contrary to the popular canard, a lack of income tax does not mean your country is doomed, socially, politically, militarily, and economically, to the global status of Somalia. Another little-known fact about the income tax: if we abolish the personal income tax today, the federal government would still collect about $3 billion per day in revenue. Compare that to its revenue in 1913 of less than $1 billion per year. Alright, so from $3 billion per day to $1 billion per year. And the obscenity of what the network has achieved becomes pretty clear. Even after adjusting for inflation, the numbers are still alarming. $1 billion per year in 1913 would equal about $25 billion per year today. At the current rate of federal spending, that inflation-adjusted $25 billion would be gone in a little over 2 days. All of this federal spending requires an ever-expanding river of money. Follow that river, and you'll find it inevitably empties into an ocean of network-connected industries and interests. Even humanitarian government services, like food stamps, are handled by J.P. Morgan and generate millions of dollars for the firm. Start looking into the military-industrial complex which serves the ultimate network interest, its sovereignty destruction project, and the costs, financial and otherwise, boggle the mind. But as bad as all of this is, we've still only scratched the surface. Yes, the income tax essentially handled the network a license to steal. Without its instruments, government, there would be no way to directly confiscate trillions of dollars annually from the labor of US citizens. The power of this funding mechanism, which did not exist for nearly 140 years of our nation's history, has strengthened the network's global influence beyond measure. However, even on its best day, the so-called income tax runs a distant second to the greatest monetary power of all, the power to create money out of thin air. And so we move on to 3. 3. Create money, create credit, create inescapable debt. In the next chapter, we'll briefly cover the basic mechanics of creating money, credit, and inescapable debt. For now, let's cover something that's arguably more important and definitely easier to understand. The implications of possessing such incredible monetary power and the story of how the network seized it. First, the implications. We'll start small and work our way up. Can you imagine if the government gave you $100 million? Think about that for a minute. Tomorrow at noon, the government has agreed to transfer $100 million into your bank account. No strings attached. Got it? Okay, let's go a little further. Can you imagine if the government gave you $500 million? How about $1 billion? Better yet, what if it simply decided to give you $1 trillion? It's difficult to get your mind around such large numbers, but really try to imagine what it would be like. For instance, if the government gave you $1 trillion and if you invested it, earning only a 7% annual return, you'd wind up with over $5.5 billion per month in additional income, roughly $192 million per day. Imagine having the ability to spend $190 million per day without ever depleting a penny of the $1 trillion you were given. How much power would you have? And with so much money to spend, how many individuals and institutions would want to be your friend? Now let's take it one step further. What if the government gave you all of the dollars? What if you were given the exclusive right to create every single dollar that exists? Try to get your head around that concept. If a dollar exists anywhere in the world, it only exists because you were given the right to create it. Now how much power do you have? The following quote provides a pretty good idea. This is by Reginald McKenna, British Chancellor of the Exchequer, as quoted in Tragedy and Hope. I'm afraid the ordinary citizen will not like to be told that the banks can and do create money and hold on, guys. and they who control the credit of the nation direct the policy of governments and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people. That statement is about as straightforward as it gets, and it comes from a man who had intimate knowledge of the topic. He worked at the highest levels within the system and is stating unequivocally exactly how it is. Those who create money and control the credit of the nation direct the policy of governments and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people. So why is it, if creating money and controlling credit confer so much power, that so few people understand either of these topics? Shouldn't we all be taught the dangers of such power? Is it any surprise that we aren't? Again, Quigley provides some insight. He explains that, for the network to achieve its objectives, it was necessary to conceal, or even to mislead, both governments and people about the nature of money and its methods of operation. Alright, you can find that, Tragedy and Hope, page 53. This practice of deceiving governments and people about money continues to this day because it's the only way for the network to maintain its current level of power. Rest assured, it is if the vast majority of people do not understand what central banks are or how they operate, it's because they were not meant to. Our global monetary system was created by men who conceal and mislead as a matter of course. It is not only how they conduct their business, it's how they intend to secure their far-reaching aim, reiterated below. The powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled by the central banks of the world acting in secret agreements. Each central bank in the hands of men like Montagu Norman of the Bank of England and Benjamin Strong of the New York Federal Reserve sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, to influence the level of economic activity in the country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. In each country, the power of the central bank rested largely on its control of credit and money supply. That's at Tragedy and Hope, page 324. It was for this purpose that the network created the Federal Reserve System. That's where we are now. Next heading. The Federal Reserve System. In Chapter 3, we covered President Taft's undoing. He refused to support the network's plan to create a central bank in the United States. And since the network couldn't fully dominate the political system of the United States without control of its credit and money supply, Taft was toppled and Wilson was installed. Shortly after taking office, Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act into law and the central bank was born. However, this isn't the full story of how the Federal Reserve System came to be. Just as citizens were misled into believing that they chose Wilson in the 1912 election, they were also misled into believing the Federal Reserve Act was written to protect them from predatory international banksters. The sad truth is, predatory international bankers secretly wrote the legislation themselves and used government to turn their wishes into law. This is a piece of the puzzle that Quigley seems to have missed. He acknowledges that network titans like Rockefeller and Morgan had enough power to cause a financial panic whenever they chose. He admits that they used their power to their own advantage, wrecking individual corporations at the expense of the holders of common stocks. He even admits that J.P. Morgan precipitated the Panic of 1907. That's in Tragedy and Hope, page 72. But the fact that their power could have been used to both take out competition and incite public demands for monetary reform that would be directed by the network itself, is not covered. It's a glaring omission. In short, the network needed a central bank to dominate the political system of the United States. But it needed another crisis to finally sell the scheme. With that perspective in mind, the Panic of 1907 looks very different. First, J.P. Morgan causes the panic, which to this day is rarely mentioned. Then he and Rockefeller halt the panic, for which to this day they are still portrayed as saviors. And out of the suffering and chaos, public demands for legislative intervention finally reached critical mass. The government then forms a monetary commission to investigate and solve the problem, headed by none other than network insider and U.S. Senator Nelson Aldrich. And the commission decides that a central bank is needed to solve the nation's woes. From there, it was simply a matter of writing the legislation and handing it off to the right politicians. Of course, the network had to conceal the fact that it would be writing the legislation itself. And this presented some problems. The lengths it went to in order to hide its role reads like a scene out of a James Bond novel. If you were alive in 1910, you wouldn't have been invited to the meeting. In fact, you would have never known that a meeting took place. Despite the enormous impact on your country's future, the scheme to create a new monetary system was none of your business. This is where the story of the Federal Reserve System begins. The banking empires of Rockefeller, Rothschild, Morgan and Warburg sent 6 representatives on their behalf to the privately owned Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. To prevent the men from being recognized, the island's permanent employees were sent on vacation and carefully screened temps took their place. Each man was sworn to secrecy and instructed to only use their first name to further conceal their identity. Nearly 2 decades passed before any of the conspirators publicly admitted they'd participated in the meeting. In that meeting, the financial elite created for themselves the monetary system that we live under today. That's 21. And apparently we missed 20. 2020. In short, the network needed a central bank to dominate the political system of the United States, but it needed another crisis. Right? 20. The panics of 1873 and 1893 caused widespread suffering and stirred demands for monetary reform. Public opinion, this is of course, solution, problem, reaction. Public opinion was already leaning heavily toward the need for legislative intervention, and the Panic of 1907 provided the final push. If the idea that bankers would actually create a panic to serve their interests seems like a stretch, consider the case of Nicholas Bidle. As president, Andrew Jackson was trying to shut down Bidle's second bank of the United States. The banker intentionally crashed the economy and blamed the ensuing financial crisis on Jackson. This served to turn the public opinion against Jackson and in favor of the bank. Discussing the tactic, Bidle commented, "Nothing but widespread suffering will produce any effect on Congress. Our only safety is in pursuing a steady course on firm restriction. I have no doubt that such a course will ultimately lead to recharter of the bank." Referring to Jackson, Bidle remarked, "This worthy president thinks that because he has scalped Indians and imprisoned judges, he is to have his way with the bank. He is mistaken." As quoted in The Creature from Jekyll Island, page 354. Alright, and 21 is Dishonest Money, Financing the Road to Ruin, pages 2 and 3. Continuing, had this meeting been covered in the press, the headline might have read, "Powerful bankers conspire on private island to seize monetary control." But then again, had it been covered in the press, the Federal Reserve Act would have never passed. Citizens wanted Congress to weaken the destructive powers of international banking interests, not expand them. Unfortunately, the Jekyll Island story didn't leak until 1916. It's 22. 22 reported by B.C. Forbes, who went on to found Forbes magazine. Reference Secrets of the Federal Reserve, page 2. Back to the text. Year didn't leak until 1916, years after the damage had already been done. And even after it was exposed, educators, commentators and historians continue to deny that the meeting ever took place. Anyone who pointed out the nefarious origins and authors of the Federal Reserve Act was smeared and dismissed as a conspiracy theorist. Fortunately, the truth finally did come out, and the conspiracy theorists were vindicated. Perhaps the most definite admission came from Frank A. Vanderlip, president of the most powerful New York bank at the time, National City Bank of New York, now Citibank. All right. There was an occasion near the close of 1910 when I was as secretive, indeed as furtive, as any conspirator. I do not feel it is any exaggeration to speak of our secret expedition to Jekyll Island as the occasion of the actual conception of what eventually became the Federal Reserve System. Discovery, we knew, simply must not happen, or else all our time and effort would be wasted. If it were to be exposed publicly that our particular group had got together and written a banking bill, that bill would have no chance whatever of passage by Congress. Although the Aldrich Federal Reserve Plan was defeated when it bore the name of Aldrich, nevertheless its essential points were all contained in the plan that finally was adopted. Frank A. van der Lip, in the 1935 Saturday Evening Post article, From Farm Boy to Financier. Despite this admission over 75 years ago, despite our participants and their biographers who've admitted the same, despite the fact that Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke returned to Jekyll Island in 2010 to commemorate the Fed's founding 100 years earlier, still the vast majority of people have never heard of the trip to Jekyll Island and have no idea that international bankers created a system that was supposed to protect them from international bankers. Blah blah blah. Bernanke being there to commemorate, that's apparently from the from 26 from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta website titled A Return to Jekyll Island. The conference was held to mark the century of the 1910 Jekyll Island meeting that resulted in draft legislation for the creation of the United States Central Bank. Right, so there's a link to frbatlanta.org. But again, should we be surprised? The education system and mainstream media are the two most powerful instruments for distributing information. Yeah, distributing information, right? Now remember, it should spring out to you that that's grammar. For the people that have managed to drag through all of those Trivium episodes we've done. Alright, so these are the two most powerful instruments for distributing information, that is grammar. And as you know, if you are arguing with somebody, the most of the time, the most used fallacy by people that haven't done their research is the aspect of neglect, which means their grammar is insufficient. Right? They're missing pieces of grammar, they're missing pieces of information, because the education system and media, mainstream media, are controlled. They decide what people get to know. Therefore, they know what people will do with the data that they are provided with. They know what kind of conclusions people will draw from the information that is being presented to them. Therefore, it's very easy to control their minds. Alright, so, and indeed, the sentence continues, powerful instruments for distributing information and creating mass awareness. Now it says awareness here. I would say create mass illusion. Regarding the media, just a handful of global news corporations can, in one day, make billions of people around the world simultaneously aware of something that was completely unknown the day before. With this kind of power, the network can choose to spread any lie or withhold any truth that it chooses. Then there is education. Millions of students can be taught the real story behind the Federal Reserve System or they can be thought a smokescreen of government intervention to protect public. They can be taught the dangers of centralized banking powers, or they can be taught nothing at all. At the end of the day, if people aren't looking beyond the network's instruments for their information, they cannot expect to know what the network doesn't want them to know. Even Quigley, apparently, was unaware of the trip to Jekyll Island. He makes no mention of the meeting in either Tragedy and Hope or the Anglo-American establishment. Since he obviously had no aversion to exposing comparable duplicity, it's reasonable to assume he didn't know that particular part of the Fed's history. Or perhaps he consulted some of the respected educators and historians who convinced him there was no evidence that it ever happened. Whatever the reason, it's an unfortunate oversight. Nothing demonstrates the network's power more convincingly than its ability to secretly write legislation that governs and outright creates its own instruments. And on that note, with its legislation successfully written, Taft ousted, and Wilson in the White House, it would seem that the network could rest easy. However, there was one more swindle needed to guarantee passage of the Federal Reserve Act. To help garner public support, the very same people who helped author the legislation on Jekyll Island began speaking out publicly against it. Alright, I think we'll just leave it here for now. Blah blah. There we go. I'll pick this up next week. We are at chapter 4 at the moment. And I want to thank the people in the chat room. And Captain Gringo, One Cracker, hey buddy. Cooper and Grump and Juana Taco. Jules, what's up? Matty Clues, hey. Possible Suspect, Road Dog, and Vince. I hope you're all doing alright. Not that you're sick of anything. What happened, P? You missed the show? Well, it should be up in the archives pretty soon. So, if you really want to listen, you could do so. After me is that other station. I'm afraid I don't know who exactly.
The very word secrecy is repugnant.
But
An open society.
you can listen to that if you stay tuned.
Inherently and historically.
You can also check out reallibertymedia.com and, of course, freedomsnetwork.com and juicy.tv. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. I'll be back next week. Take care.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a